At the restaurant, my sister tapped her glass and said, "Everyone, let's toast to family, except Wendy, she's just the adopted one." The table laughed. A minute later the waiter dropped a $3,270 check in front of me for everyone's food. I pushed it back and said, "You should run my sister's card, the reservation is under her name." Her face went completely white, and then the manager walked up. Can you imagine being at your own father's 60th birthday dinner, surrounded by your family, only for your sister to stand up and publicly declare you're not real family? Because that's exactly what happened to me. But what she didn't realize. That moment cost her everything, and it finally, irrevocably, set me free. It all started, as these things often do, with an invitation. My sister, Victoria, delivered it herself, showing up at my downtown loft with that smile she wears. You know, the one, the kind that never quite reaches her eyes, the one that always precedes a veiled insult disguised as concern. "Family dinner," she announced, waving a cream-colored envelope like a trophy. "Dad's 60th. I've reserved the private room at Carmichael's for Saturday." Carmichael's. Just the name made my stomach clench. That place costs more per plate than most people spend on groceries in a month. I watched Victoria, searching for the catch, because with her, there was always a catch. "Why are you hand-delivering this?" I asked, already leaning against my doorframe, preparing for battle. "Because I wanted to make absolutely certain you'd come," she purred, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "It wouldn't be a proper celebration without the whole family." That word, family, landed with all the weight she intended. Ever since Dad married Alina when I was 7, and Victoria 9, that word had been a weapon in their arsenal. Alina never let me forget I wasn't her biological daughter, and Victoria? She inherited her mother's talent for subtle, insidious cruelty. Still, I accepted. A small, foolish part of me, the part that remembered Dad reading bedtime stories before Alina entered our lives, hoped this dinner might be different. That maybe, just maybe, we could be a real family for one night. Saturday arrived, with Chicago giving us some unseasonable warmth for October. I dressed carefully, a navy silk blouse, tailored pants, something that projected confidence, not desperation. The reflection staring back at me looked composed, capable. Nothing like the uncertain girl who used to cry in her childhood bedroom while Victoria and Alina laughed downstairs. Carmichael's itself was exactly what you'd expect: exposed brick, Edison bulbs, all designed to make the wealthy feel edgy while dropping obscene amounts of money on tiny, deconstructed food. The hostess led me past the main dining area to a private room where my family had already gathered. Dad was by the bar, his silver hair perfect, nursing his signature bourbon. Alina perched on a velvet settee, her designer dress probably worth my entire month's rent. And Victoria? She was holding court in the center of the room, surrounded by her husband Marcus, their 2 kids, and Alina's sister, Patricia, with her family. But then, Dad saw me. His face genuinely brightened, and he crossed the room, pulling me into a hug that, for a moment, felt truly real. "You look wonderful, sweetheart." "Happy birthday, Dad." I handed him his gift, a first edition of his favorite Hemingway novel I'd tracked down. His eyes lit up as he examined it. "This must have cost you." "Don't worry about it," I said, squeezing his arm. "You're worth it." Then Alina materialized beside us, her expensive perfume arriving 3 seconds before she did. "How thoughtful," she said, her tone suggesting the exact opposite. "I got your father a week at that exclusive golf resort in Scotland. But books are nice, too." The comparison hung in the air like spoiled meat. Victoria smirked from across the room, already enjoying the moment she'd orchestrated without saying a word. "I love it," Dad said firmly, tucking the book under his arm. "This is incredibly special, Selena." We settled around the table. Of course, Victoria had arranged the seating. I was between Patricia's husband, Gerald, and Victoria's older son, Tyler, effectively isolated from any meaningful conversation. The prices on the leather-bound menus required a double take. Appetizers started at $45. Entrees soared. Past $80. The wine list? That read like a mortgage payment. Order whatever you'd like, Victoria announced, gesturing grandly. Tonight, we're celebrating properly. I ordered modestly, a simple salad, the least expensive fish. The rest of the table requested lobster, Wagyu beef, bottles of wine that probably cost more than my car payment. Victoria ordered the chef's tasting menu with wine pairings. Marcus demanded 40-year-old scotch. And a leaner? She insisted on imported caviar service as an additional appetizer for the table. The evening unfolded with the familiar patterns. Eleanor dominated the conversation, her stories designed to showcase Victoria's accomplishments, her promotion to senior vice president, her children's admission to exclusive private schools, her recent feature in Chicago Business Magazine. Of course, not everyone defines success the same way, Eleanor said, her gaze sliding towards me. Selena's chosen a more modest path with her graphic design work. Very creative. Creative. In her mouth, it sounded like an insult, implying my career was just a hobby. Never mind, I'd built a thriving freelance business with clients across the country. Actually, I just signed a contract with, I started. Oh, how wonderful. Victoria interrupted, not letting me finish. It's so important to have little projects that bring joy. Speaking of which, Mother, did you see the spread about our house in modern luxury? I sank back in my chair, the familiar sting of being dismissed washing over me like cold water. This was how it always went. Any attempt I made to share my accomplishments was steamrolled by Victoria's perfectly timed interruptions or Eleanor's dismissive redirection. Dad caught my eye from across the table, offering an apologetic shrug. But he didn't intervene. He never did. Marcus launched into a detailed description of their recent kitchen renovation, imported Italian marble, custom cabinetry that cost more than some people's annual salaries. Patricia chimed in with admiring questions, playing her role as the supportive aunt. Gerald nodded politely, though I noticed his attention drifting to his phone every few minutes. The servers brought out the next course, some foam-topped, abstract thing that looked more like a science experiment than food. Victoria photographed hers from 3 different angles before taking a single bite. No doubt for her perfectly curated social media. Her Instagram portrayed a flawless life, beautiful home, successful career, photogenic children, adoring husband. The reality, I knew, was messier. Marcus' real estate ventures had taken hits, and Victoria's promotion came with crushing expectations. But the facade remained impeccable. Tyler, sweetie, sit up straight, Victoria said absently, not looking up from her phone. The boy adjusted his posture without comment, well-trained. Noah, his younger brother, continued playing his game, headphones blocking out the adult conversation entirely. I wondered what it was like for those kids, growing up in a household where appearances mattered more than genuine connection. Eleanor started talking about the charity gala she was organizing. We're expecting over 300 attendees, she declared proudly. The governor confirmed he's coming. Victoria is handling all the corporate sponsorships through her firm's connections. That's quite an undertaking, Dad offered, playing his expected role. Well, someone has to maintain cultural standards in this city, Eleanor replied, her tone suggesting she bore this burden nobly. Though I wish we had more family support for these endeavors. Patricia, you and Gerald are coming, of course? Wouldn't miss it, Patricia confirmed quickly. Eleanor's gaze drifted toward me, lingering just long enough to make her point without stating it. I hadn't been invited to help. My contributions, naturally, weren't deemed necessary or appropriate for Eleanor's high society event. The wine kept flowing. Victoria ordered a second bottle of something French and expensive, waving away the servers. Attempt to show her the label. Marcus regaled the table with a 15-minute story about a difficult client. I found myself studying the room's decor, avoiding screaming from boredom. Everything was designed to look industrial and authentic while costing a fortune. Much like the people seated around this table. How's your fish, Selena? Dad asked, making another attempt to include me. It's delicious, I said. Honestly, the chef's technique was flawless, even if the portion could have fit in my palm. Really well prepared. I'm sure it's adequate, Alina said, her tone making clear that ordering the least expensive entree was another social failing. Marcus ordered Wagyu. It's supposed to be extraordinary. It's imported from Japan, you know. The cattle are raised on a special diet and massaged daily. I didn't know cows appreciated spa treatments, I said dryly. Marcus laughed, completely missing my sarcasm. The marbling is incredible. You should try a bite. He cut a piece and extended his fork. I'm good, thanks, I said, not wanting anything from these people I hadn't ordered myself. Victoria was scrolling through her phone again, barely touching her tasting menu courses. Each tiny plate arrived with the server's practice description, and Victoria would nod absently before taking 1 or 2 bites and pushing it aside. The waste was obscene. Nobody commented. Tyler asked to be excused. Victoria waved permission without looking up. So, Selena, Patricia said, pivoting toward me with what looked like genuine curiosity. Are you seeing anyone special these days? The question landed like a grenade in the middle of the table. Everyone's attention swiveled toward me, sudden and focused. I could practically hear the calculations happening behind their eyes. Poor Selena, nearly 30 and still single. Clearly something must be wrong with her. I'm dating casually, I said, keeping my tone light. Nothing serious at the moment. That's probably for the best, Alina said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. You're so busy with your little business. A serious relationship requires time and energy to nurture properly. The implication was clear. I was too focused on my inadequate career to attract or maintain a meaningful relationship. Never mind, I'd ended my last serious relationship because he'd expected me to make myself smaller to accommodate his ego. I'd learned that lesson. Victoria met Marcus at a charity function, Alina continued, shifting into matchmaker mode. Perhaps you should attend more social events, Selena. You can't meet quality people if you're always locked away in your apartment working. It's a loft, I corrected automatically. And I meet plenty of people through my work. Of course you do, Victoria said, finally looking up from her phone. Her smile was sharp. Though I imagine most of them are other freelancers, not exactly the same social caliber as corporate events. The judgment in her voice made my teeth ache. As if a person's worth could be measured by their job title or where you met them. I dated a lawyer once, a man who checked every box on Alina and Victoria's list. He was boring, condescending, and assumed his career made him more important than mine. When I ended it, Victoria had called me foolish for letting a catch get away. Gerald cleared his throat uncomfortably. He'd been mostly silent, and I suspected he found these gatherings as tedious as I did. The servers cleared our main course plates and presented dessert menus, more expensive options, each dessert costing what a reasonable person might spend on an entire meal. I declined dessert entirely, earning a disapproving look from Alina. Apparently, refusing to add another $40 to the growing bill was yet another social failing. While we waited, Victoria launched into a story about Tyler's recent academic achievement. He'd scored in the 98th percentile on some standardized test. The entire table offered congratulations, praising Victoria's parenting and Tyler's obvious intelligence. Noah, still present but ignored, didn't look up from his game. Of course, we've always emphasized education in our family, Alina said pointedly. Though different children have different strengths. Some are more academically inclined, while others are more artistic. Her gaze landed on me again. I'd been an excellent student, graduated near the top of my class, earned scholarships. But Alina had always dismissed academic achievements that didn't come from Victoria, finding ways to minimize or reframe them as less impressive. Dad shifted in his seat, his discomfort visible but not translated into action. How many times had I watched him recognize these moments of cruelty and choose silence over confrontation? How many years had I made excuses for him, telling myself he was trapped, that he was doing his best? The desserts arrived with ceremony. Victoria's souffle was presented with flourish. Eleanor's tiramisu came deconstructed across a slate plate. Marcus G's selection included 5 varieties. I sipped my water, feeling increasingly detached. These people shared my last name and my father, but we inhabited completely different worlds. They measured worth in dollars and status. I measured it in integrity and genuine connection. We were never going to understand each other. The conversation flowed around me like I existed behind soundproof glass. Patricia's family discussed their upcoming vacation to the Maldives. Marcus detailed his latest real estate acquisition. Tyler and Noah played on their tablets. Dad tried several times to include me, asking about my work and a recent hiking trip. But Eleanor and Victoria kept redirecting focus like expert sheepdogs, herding conversation exactly where they wanted it to go. Halfway through the main courses, or maybe it was dessert, time blurred, Victoria tapped her wine glass with her knife. The sharp crystal chime cut through the ambient conversation, drawing everyone's attention to her. "I'd like to propose a toast," she announced, standing with her glass raised. Her smile was radiant, the kind that appeared in her social media photos and fooled people who didn't know better. "To family," she began. "To the bonds that tie us together through thick and thin." Everyone raised their glasses, even Tyler and Noah with their sodas that probably cost $12 each. "To the people who share our blood and our history," Victoria continued, her voice warm and inclusive. "To the connections that truly matter." She paused, her gaze sweeping the table before landing on me with laser precision. "Everyone here represents those sacred family ties." Well, her smile sharpened into something truly cruel. "Everyone except Selena. She's just the adopted one." Silence detonated across the table like a shockwave. Then Marcus chuckled. Eleanor's sister, Patricia, covered her mouth but couldn't hide her smirk. Eleanor herself laughed openly, not even bothering to disguise her amusement. Dad's face flushed crimson, but he said nothing, and his silence hurt worse than Victoria's words. Tyler and Noah looked confused. Gerald shifted uncomfortably beside me, but most of the table was laughing or fighting smiles, treating Victoria's cruelty like an amusing observation rather than what it was, a calculated, public humiliation. Victoria remained standing, her glass still raised, savoring her moment. "To family," she repeated, emphasizing the word, staring directly at me. Something crystallized inside my chest. 28 years of similar moments flashed through my mind like a film reel. Every snide comment. Every excluded invitation. Every time Victoria had wielded her biological connection like a weapon, while I was expected to just endure it. I remembered being 12, overhearing Eleanor tell Victoria that blood was thicker than water, that real family bonds couldn't be broken by something as trivial as paperwork. I remembered being 16, when Victoria had deliberately excluded me from her Sweet 16 party planning, telling mutual acquaintances I wasn't really her sister. I remembered college graduation, when Eleanor had made a point of saying she was proud of her daughter while looking exclusively at Victoria, though we'd both graduated the same month. Every Christmas where Victoria received elaborate gifts, while mine were practical and forgettable. Every birthday where Eleanor organized lavish celebrations for Victoria but could barely remember the date of mine. Every achievement I'd earned that was met with lukewarm acknowledgement, while Victoria's smallest accomplishments were celebrated like Nobel Prize wins. I remembered Dad's excuses. Eleanor is adjusting. Victoria is just going through a phase. Try to understand. It's complicated for them. Years of excuses. Each one asking me to be smaller, quieter, more accommodating. Each one choosing the path of least resistance over defending the daughter he promised to protect when he adopted me. The anger that rose in me wasn't hot and explosive. It was cold, clear, and absolutely certain. I was done. Done accepting cruelty as the price of belonging. Done making myself smaller to fit into a family that had never made room for me. Done pretending that their behavior was somehow my fault or my responsibility to fix. I didn't stand. I didn't shout or cry or give her the dramatic reaction she clearly wanted. Instead, I set down my fork with deliberate calm and took a sip of my water. The server, who had been attending our table, approached with impeccable timing, clearly ready to begin clearing plates and discussing dessert. He held a leather portfolio that I recognized as the check. "Excuse me, miss," he said, stopping beside my chair. "I have the final bill for your party." He extended the portfolio toward me. The table had gone quiet again, watching this interaction. I could feel Victoria's satisfaction radiating from across the table. One final humiliation, where I'd be expected to fumble through, explaining I couldn't possibly afford to treat everyone. I accepted the portfolio and flipped it open. The total made my stomach drop. $3,270. $3,270. For one dinner. For people who had just laughed while my sister announced I wasn't really part of the family. I looked at the bill for a long moment, doing the math. My modest salad and fish probably accounted for maybe $80 of this total. The rest belonged to people who'd spent the evening treating me like a tolerated outsider. "There's been a mistake," I said calmly, closing the portfolio and extending it back to the server. His professional smile faltered slightly. "I'm sorry, miss. Is there an error on the bill?" "The charges look correct," I said. "But you brought this to the wrong person." I slid the leather portfolio down the table toward Victoria with deliberate precision. It glided across the white tablecloth and stopped directly in front of her, interrupting her post-humiliation glow. "Victoria made the reservation under her name," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the private room. "She selected this restaurant, invited everyone here, and specifically told us all to order whatever we wanted. I'm sure she'll be happy to handle the bill for her event." Victoria's face underwent a remarkable transformation. The smug satisfaction drained away, replaced by genuine shock. Her mouth opened, but no sound emerged immediately. She finally sputtered. "You can't possibly what?" I asked pleasantly. "Expect you to pay for the dinner party you organized? That seems perfectly reasonable to me. This was Dad's birthday." Victoria's voice climbed an octave. "Obviously, someone needs to cover it." "Then cover it," I interrupted. "You're senior vice president now, right? That's what Alina was just telling everyone. I'm sure your salary makes this dinner a minor expense." Marcus leaned toward his wife, whispering urgently. Alina's face had gone rigid, calculating the situation. Patricia exchanged glances with Gerald. Dad looked between Victoria and me with confusion and something that might have been dawning realization. "I don't have," Victoria started, then stopped, clearly not wanting to admit financial limitations in front of the same people she'd just impressed with stories of her success. The server stood frozen between us, the portfolio still in Victoria's section of the table, clearly wishing he'd chosen a different profession. "Perhaps we could split it," Alina suggested, her voice tight. "Everyone could contribute their portion." "Wonderful idea," I said brightly. "My portion is $83 for the salad and fish, plus my share of the table's water and bread. I'll cover that happily. The remaining $3,187 belongs to the rest of you." I pulled out my wallet and placed 5 $20 bills on the table, a generous tip included for my portion. Then I stood, smoothing my blouse with steady hands. "Although," I continued, "I'm just the adopted one, not really family according to Victoria, so maybe I shouldn't be contributing at all. I'd hate to overstep my bounds." Victoria's face had transitioned from shock to fury to something approaching panic. Her hand moved toward her purse, then stopped. Marcus whispered more urgently. The calculation happening behind Victoria's eyes was almost visible: how to handle this without admitting she couldn't actually afford the extravagant dinner she'd orchestrated. The private room door opened, and a man in a manager's suit entered, clearly summoned by our server's distress signal. "Good evening," he said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "I'm Jeremy Lawson, the general manager. I understand there might be some confusion about tonight's bill." "No confusion," I said before Victoria could speak. "Victoria Clark made the reservation, hosted the party, and invited all the guests. The bill quite correctly belongs with her. Jeremy's gaze moved to Victoria, taking in her deer-in-headlights expression. Miss Clark, you did make the reservation under your name, and indicated in your booking that you'd be handling payment for the party. The blood drained from Victoria's face. Apparently, in her rush to orchestrate this public humiliation, she'd checked some box during the reservation process that she hadn't bothered to read. I didn't mean, Victoria stammered, her usual eloquence deserting her completely. When you reserved our private dining room, Jeremy continued professionally, you confirmed via email that you'd be providing payment at the conclusion of the evening. We sent you 3 separate confirmations, including an estimated cost based on the number of guests you indicated. Surely, there's been some misunderstanding, Alina intervened, her voice sharp with authority. My daughter wouldn't have agreed to cover an entire party's expenses. I have the email exchanges if you'd like to review them, Jeremy said, pulling out a tablet. Sent to Clark@harrisonfinancial.com. The reservation confirmation specifically states that the party host assumes responsibility for all charges incurred during the private dining experience. Marcus had gone pale now, too, clearly doing mental math on their bank account. Victoria looked between her mother and her husband like a trapped animal seeking escape. This is ridiculous. Alina snapped. Obviously, this was meant to be split among attendees. Actually, Dad's voice cut through the chaos. Quiet but firm. I think Selina is right. Every head swiveled toward him. He'd stood from his chair, his expression harder than I'd seen in years. The mild-mannered father who usually let Alina and Victoria run roughshod over every situation had apparently reached some internal limit. Victoria organized this dinner, Dad continued. She selected this expensive restaurant, encouraged everyone to order freely, and made no mention of splitting the bill. If she made a reservation under her name and committed to covering it, then that's her responsibility. Robert. Alina gasped, her composure cracking. You cannot possibly expect your daughter to. My daughter just announced in front of everyone that Selina isn't really family, Dad said, his voice gaining steel. She humiliated her sister. Publicly at what was supposed to be a celebration. Maybe it's time Victoria learned that actions have consequences. The private room had gone completely silent, except for the ambient music filtering through the speakers. Tyler and Noah stared at their tablets, clearly wishing they could teleport somewhere else. Patricia and Gerald studied the tablecloth with intense focus. Victoria's eyes were bright with tears now, but I felt no sympathy. Those tears were born of embarrassment and panic, not remorse for her cruelty. I don't have $3,000 in my checking account right now, Victoria finally admitted, her voice small. The reservation system must have malfunctioned. I never intended to cover everyone's meals. Then perhaps, Jeremy said smoothly, we could arrange a payment plan. Carmichael's is happy to work with our guests to ensure. No need, I interrupted. Everyone looked at me with expressions ranging from hope to confusion. I'll cover it. The shock rippling through the room was almost tangible. Alina's jaw actually dropped. Dad shook his head, starting to protest. But I was already pulling out my credit card. Not my regular one, but the business card I rarely used except for major expenses. Selina, you don't have to, Dad started. I know I don't, I said. But I'm going to anyway. I handed my card to Jeremy, who accepted it with professional grace despite the drama he just witnessed. As he processed the payment at the server station, I turned back to my family. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice carrying that same calm quality it had maintained all evening. I'm paying this bill because I can, not because anyone here deserves it. And I want everyone to remember this moment. I let my gaze move around the table, making eye contact with each person. Remember that the adopted daughter, the one who isn't really family, according to Victoria, just saved you all from a humiliating situation. Remember that the person you've spent years treating as lesser just proved she's doing better than you assumed. Victoria flinched like I'd slapped her. My graphic design work, I continued, those little projects Alina mentioned? I built a business that generated $400,000 in revenue last year. I own my loft outright. No mortgage. I have more in savings than most people earn in a year. But I've never felt the need to parade my success around like a trophy, because I don't measure my worth by making others feel small. Eleanor had gone ashen. Patricia stared at me with new calculation in her eyes. Marcus looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Victoria, you wanted everyone to know I'm adopted, I said, finally addressing my sister directly. Fine, it's true. Dad chose me. He picked me out of every other kid he could have helped. And he brought me into his life because he wanted to, not because biology forced him to. Dad's eyes were wet now, his hand pressed against his mouth. You were born into this family, I told Victoria. You had no choice. But I was chosen. And right now, I'm choosing to walk away from people who think bloodlines matter more than how you treat each other. Jeremy returned with my card and receipt. I signed quickly, adding a 30% tip for our server, who'd endured this circus. Dad, I said, turning to him. I love you. Happy birthday. But I won't be attending any more family gatherings where I'm treated like this. If you want a relationship with me, it'll be one-on-one from now on. He nodded slowly, understanding and regret warring across his features. I'm sorry, he whispered. I should have stopped this years ago. Yeah, I agreed gently. You should have. I collected my coat from the rack by the door. Behind me, the private room remained silent, except for the sound of Tyler asking his mother in a stage whisper if they were poor. Walking through Carmichael's main dining room toward the exit, I felt lighter than I had in years. $3,000 was a lot of money, but the liberation of finally speaking my truth was worth every penny. My phone buzzed before I reached my car. A text from Dad. Asterisk, can we have lunch next week? Just us. I have a lot to apologize for. Asterisk, I smiled at the screen, relief loosening the last knot of tension in my chest. Another text followed immediately. Asterisk, also, your mother would be so proud of you. I'm sorry I let you forget how much she loved you. Asterisk, my birth mother, the woman who died when I was 5, leaving Dad to raise me alone until Eleanor arrived. Tears pricked my eyes, but they were cleansing, not painful. I texted back, lunch sounds good. And, Dad, thanks for finally standing up for me tonight. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Asterisk, thank you for standing up for yourself. I'm ashamed it took me this long to follow your example. Asterisk, my phone buzzed again. Victoria. This time, I deleted the message without reading it. Whatever excuse or accusation she'd crafted didn't matter anymore. The November air bit cold against my face as I walked to my car, but Chicago's skyline glittered beautifully against the dark sky. Somewhere behind me, my family was probably still sitting in that private room, processing what had happened and scrambling to figure out how to explain it to their social circle. I wondered if Victoria would tell people about her adopted sister who'd humiliated her at their father's birthday dinner. Probably she'd spin it, paint herself as the victim. But the people who mattered, the ones who'd witnessed her cruelty, would know the truth. My phone rang as I started my car. Dad's number. Hey, I answered. I just wanted you to know, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Eleanor and I are going to have a serious conversation tonight. The way she's treated you all these years, the way I've allowed her to treat you, that ends now. Dad, I'm not asking you to choose between, I'm not choosing, he interrupted firmly. I'm correcting a mistake I should have addressed years ago. You are my daughter, my first daughter, and I've let you down by not making that crystal clear to everyone from the beginning. Something warm and healing spread through my chest. I appreciate that. The book you gave me, he continued, do you remember what Hemingway wrote about courage? Asterisk, courage is grace under pressure. Asterisk, I quoted. You showed more courage tonight than I've shown in 10 years, Dad said. I'm sorry it took public humiliation for me to find my backbone. We talked for another 20 minutes, sitting in our respective cars, finally having the honest conversation we should have had a decade ago. He explained how he'd convinced himself that keeping peace with Eleanor was worth the small compromises, not realizing those compromises had accumulated into a massive betrayal of the daughter he'd chosen to raise. When we hung up, I drove home through Chicago's late-night traffic, past the lake, where streetlights reflected like scattered diamonds. My loft waited, peaceful and mine, paid for with money I'd earned building something from nothing. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls and 32 text messages. Victoria, Eleanor, even Marcus, all demanding, explaining, accusing, apologizing in various combinations. Patricia had sent a long message about how I'd made a scene and damaged Victoria's reputation. Tyler had somehow gotten my number and sent a confused text asking why everyone was fighting. I blocked Victoria and Eleanor's numbers, ignored Patricia, and responded to Tyler with a gentle explanation that sometimes adults have disagreements, and it wasn't his fault. Dad's lunch invitation arrived formally via email later that day, suggesting a small Italian place we'd loved when I was a teenager, just the two of us. No Eleanor, no Victoria. A beginning. 2 weeks later, Dad filed for separation from Eleanor. He called to tell me himself, explaining he'd spent too many years letting her poison what should have been a loving, blended family. The divorce would be complicated and expensive, but he sounded more alive than he had in years. Your mother, your first mother, Sarah, he told me, she would have shut this down immediately. I dishonored her memory by letting Eleanor turn our home into a battlefield. Victoria sent one final email months later when the dust had settled. She'd apparently been in therapy, working through what she called her family dysfunction patterns. The email contained what seemed like genuine apologies, admitting she'd used me as a target for her own insecurities about never feeling good enough for Eleanor. I responded cordially, but distantly. Forgiveness was one thing. A restored relationship was another. Some bridges, once burned, stay burned. Dad and I have lunch twice a month now. We talk about everything except Eleanor and Victoria, building a relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligatory family ties. He's asked about my childhood, really asked, really listened, for the first time since Eleanor entered our lives. Last week, he handed me an envelope over pasta carbonara at our regular spot. Inside was a check for $3,187. I can't take this back, I protested. Consider it a very late birthday gift, he said firmly, for all the birthdays I didn't properly celebrate because I was too busy keeping Eleanor happy. I kept the check. Used it to book a trip to Scotland. Ironic, considering that's where Victoria had sent Dad for his birthday. But I wasn't trying to compete anymore. I was simply living my life on my terms, freed from the weight of trying to earn love from people who had never intended to give it. The family dinner at Carmichael's became something of a legend in Dad's social circle. He doesn't hide what happened, doesn't try to spin it favorably. When people ask about his divorce, he tells them the truth. He finally realized he'd been enabling cruelty toward his daughter and decided it was time to choose differently. Sometimes I think about Victoria's toast. About her standing there with her wine glass raised, announcing to everyone that I wasn't really family. About the laughter that followed, the casual cruelty of people who saw no problem with public humiliation. And then I think about what happened next. About sliding that bill back down the table. About the look on Victoria's face when she realized her carefully orchestrated trap had snapped shut on her instead. About finally speaking truth to people who'd spent years pretending their behavior was acceptable. The adoption papers are framed in my loft now, hanging in my office where I work on designs for clients who pay extremely well for my little creative projects. Dad gave them to me on my birthday this year, along with a note written in his precise handwriting, * you were chosen. That has always meant more than biology ever could. I'm sorry I forgot that for a while. Thank you for reminding me what truly matters. * I don't regret paying that $3,000 bill. Money comes and goes. But self-respect, once reclaimed, becomes permanent. And the price of my freedom from years of accepted cruelty? Worth every single penny. Victoria can keep her biological family bonds. I'm doing just fine with the one I chose.